The morning sun rose over the red cliffs of New Mexico, spreading its golden light across the dry land. The wind carried the scent of dust and sagebrush, and far in the distance, the cries of eagles echoed through the wide, empty sky. Among the silence of the desert walked Maria, a woman no older than 25, her dark hair tangled from wind and sorrow. Her steps were slow, her eyes heavy with tears. She no longer had the strength to cry. Only a few days earlier, Maria had been part of a small Apache settlement where life was hard but familiar. She had grown up among those people, learning to cook over open fires, gather berries, and sing to the spirits of the land. But everything changed the day her husband died. He had been a good man, a hunter with kind eyes. His passing left a hole in her world, but she believed time and work would help her survive. Yet instead of comfort, her heart met cruelty. The elders of her tribe began to whisper that Maria was cursed, that no child had ever come from her marriage. To them, a woman's value rested in her ability to give life. One cold evening, when the fires burned low and the stars filled the sky, Maria was called to the council tent. The old chief looked at her with tired eyes. His voice was gentle, but the words broke her. "Maria," he said, "you have no husband and no children. We have little food this season. The white settlers trade good things, blankets, salt, and tools. You can help the tribe one last time." She understood what that meant. Her heart turned cold. They planned to send her away, to be given to strangers in return for goods. She tried to plead, but no one met her eyes. Not even her own cousins spoke up for her. The next morning, without a farewell, Maria was led to the edge of the camp where two men waited with a wagon. The men were settlers passing through. They didn't know her story and didn't seem to care. They handed over a few supplies, bags of flour, dried beans, and a roll of cloth, and the deal was done. Maria sat quietly in the back of the wagon, her eyes staring into the horizon. The road stretched endlessly ahead, filled with dust and silence. As the wagon rolled over the uneven ground, memories came rushing back. She remembered her childhood laughter, her mother's songs, her husband's smile when he brought her wildflowers from the hills. Now all of that seemed like a dream she could never return to. After several hours of travel, a sudden storm appeared. The wind howled and rain began to fall hard against the wooden boards. The two men stopped near a small stream and decided to rest until the weather cleared. Maria stepped out of the wagon, her clothes soaked, her hair plastered to her face. She walked a few steps away and looked up at the sky, letting the rain wash her face. That night, while the others slept, she made a choice. She couldn't live as someone's property. Quietly, she gathered a few pieces of bread and a small blanket and walked away from the camp. Her feet sank into the wet earth as she disappeared into the darkness. By sunrise, Maria was miles away. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to keep moving. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, and the sun soon burned her skin. She found shade under a twisted mesquite tree and rested there, whispering a small prayer for strength. Days passed. She drank from muddy puddles and ate what little she could find, wild roots and cactus fruit. The land around her was both beautiful and cruel, with red rocks rising like towers and endless plains that shimmered in the heat. At night, she slept under the stars, her blanket wrapped tight around her shoulders. Sometimes she thought she could hear her husband's voice in the wind, telling her not to give up. Other times, she wondered if her spirit would simply fade away in the desert, leaving no trace behind. But Maria was stronger than she knew. Each morning, she forced herself to stand and walk again. Her body ached, but her will kept her going. She followed the faint tracks of horses and wagons, hoping they would lead to people, anyone who might show mercy. One afternoon, she came upon a dry riverbed. A single tree stood there, its branches bent and lonely. Nearby, she saw a tiny bird with a broken wing struggling in the dust. She gently picked it up, held it close, and whispered softly until it calmed. That small act reminded her that even the weak could offer kindness. She released the bird under the shade and smiled for the first time in weeks, but her journey was far from over. As the days grew hotter, her strength began to fade. The soles of her feet were torn from walking barefoot on sharp stones. Her lips cracked and her throat burned for lack of water. Still, she refused to lie down. One more step, she told herself. Just one more step. By the fifth day, she was barely standing. The desert blurred before her eyes and her legs trembled. In the distance, she thought she saw something. Perhaps a fence, a windmill, or maybe a dream. She blinked hard, trying to make sense of it. Slowly, through the haze, a small ranch appeared. Wooden fences, a barn, and smoke rising from a chimney. Maria's heart leapt. She tried to call out, but her voice came out as a whisper. With the last of her strength, she staggered toward the ranch. Her feet dragged across the sand until she reached the gate. There she fell to her knees, too weak to take another step. From the porch of the house, a man watched. His name was Ethan Carter, a rancher known for his quiet nature. He had seen many travelers cross the land, but never a woman like her, worn, fragile, and alone. At first he thought she might be another wanderer passing through. But when she collapsed, he ran toward her without hesitation. When Ethan lifted her from the ground, Maria's skin was burning with fever. Her hands were cold, her breath shallow. He carried her inside, placed her on a couch near the fireplace, and covered her with a quilt. For a long moment, he simply looked at her, this stranger who seemed to have carried all the sadness in the world on her shoulders. Outside, the wind blew softly across the empty land. Inside, the small fire crackled, casting a warm glow over Maria's face. Ethan didn't know who she was or where she came from. All he knew was that she needed help and he couldn't turn away. That was the moment everything began to change. Ethan Carter was a man of few words. He lived miles away from the nearest town, tending to his small ranch and raising his baby daughter, Clara, all on his own. His days were filled with chores, feeding the horses, mending fences, and keeping the little house running. Life was quiet, steady, and sometimes painfully lonely. His wife, Annie, had passed away a year before. Since then, the laughter in the house had faded. The rooms felt too big, the nights too long, and every sound reminded him of what he had lost. But for Clara's sake, he kept going. She was the reason he woke before dawn, the reason he smiled through his sadness. The day he found Maria near his fence line, the sky had turned the color of copper. He hadn't expected to see anyone that far out. Only the wind and the cattle usually visited that part of the land. When he saw her fall, something inside him moved. He didn't stop to think. He ran. Ethan carried her gently into his home. Her skin was hot from fever and her lips were dry and cracked. He placed her on the couch near the fireplace, covering her with a thick wool blanket. His hands, rough from years of work, were surprisingly gentle as he brushed the dust from her face. For a long time he sat beside her, watching her chest rise and fall with weak breaths. There was something fragile about her, like a bird that had been caught in a storm. He couldn't leave her like that. When Clara began to cry from the next room, Ethan sighed softly. He picked up his daughter, holding her close while glancing back at the woman on the couch. "Looks like we've got company, little one," he whispered. Clara only blinked her big blue eyes and reached for his beard. That evening, Ethan made soup. The only thing he knew would be gentle on the stomach. When Maria woke for a few moments, she tried to speak, but her voice came out in broken words. Ethan shook his head kindly. "Don't talk. Just rest." He lifted the spoon to her lips, helping her take small sips. The warmth of the soup brought a faint color back to her cheeks. When she finished, she looked at him with grateful eyes, whispering something in her native tongue. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the feeling. Thankfulness mixed with fear and exhaustion. Over the next few days, Ethan did what he could to help her heal. He brought her clean water, soft bread, and kept the fire burning. When she was strong enough to sit up, he gave her one of Annie's old shawls to keep warm. At first, she spoke little. She didn't seem to trust her own voice, but she watched everything. The way Ethan cared for his daughter, the way he worked from sunrise to sunset, always patient and quiet. Maria could see he was a man who carried his pain with dignity. One morning when Ethan came in from the barn, he found Maria trying to stand. "Easy there," he said quickly, stepping forward. "You're still weak." She shook her head slowly. "I must help," she said in careful English. Her voice was soft but steady. "You work alone." Ethan hesitated. "You don't owe me anything," he replied. Maria looked down, her eyes filling with a sadness deeper than words. "I owe the world more than I can pay," she whispered. After that, Ethan didn't stop her when she started helping. She began with small tasks, folding the baby's blankets, sweeping the floor, tending the fire. Her movements were slow at first, but graceful. Soon she was doing more, feeding the chickens, washing clothes by the stream, even humming little tunes while Clara played nearby. Ethan would sometimes stand at the doorway, watching them. The sight stirred something in his heart. Maria, with her dark hair shining in the sun, her gentle hands guiding Clara's small ones as they played with pebbles. It was a scene that made the lonely ranch feel alive again. One afternoon, as he worked in the field, Ethan noticed Maria walking toward him carrying a pail of water. The wind caught her shawl, lifting it slightly around her shoulders. For the first time in a long while, he found himself smiling, not out of politeness or habit, but out of genuine warmth. "Thank you," he said as she handed him the water. She nodded shyly. "You kind man," she replied, her accent soft and musical. Ethan chuckled. "Just doing what anyone should do." Maria shook her head gently. "Not anyone. Many walk away." Her words stayed with him for days. That evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, Maria sat on the porch with Clara in her lap, rocking her to sleep. Ethan watched from the doorway. The scene filled him with peace he hadn't known in a long time. The baby's tiny hands clutched Maria's shawl, and the woman's voice, singing a low, soothing tune, floated through the cool night air. Ethan leaned against the doorframe, listening. When Maria noticed him, she stopped singing, a little embarrassed. "Don't stop," he said quietly. "She likes it." Maria smiled faintly. "My mother sang this when I was small," she said. "It keeps away sadness." Ethan looked at the stars above them. "Then keep singing. We could use a little less sadness around here." For the first time since his wife's passing, Ethan laughed softly. It felt strange, like remembering how to breathe after holding it in for too long. As the days turned into weeks, life on the ranch began to feel different. The once empty house was now filled with small sounds. The clinking of dishes, the laughter of a baby, the rustle of a shawl moving through the rooms. Maria didn't just help with chores. She brought warmth. She still didn't talk much about her past. Whenever Ethan tried to ask where she came from, her eyes would drift away, as if her memories were too heavy to share. So he didn't press. He knew pain when he saw it, and he respected her silence. But there were moments, quiet, unspoken ones, when their eyes met and said everything words could not. They were two lonely hearts, both carrying loss, both slowly healing through kindness. One afternoon, a neighbor rode by, the first visitor in weeks. His name was Tom Briggs, a rough but friendly rancher who often traded supplies. When he saw Maria working near the porch, he looked surprised. "Didn't know you took in help, Ethan," he said with a teasing grin. "She's not help," Ethan replied calmly. "Just someone who needed a place to rest." Tom nodded, though his eyes lingered curiously. When he rode away, Maria looked worried. "I can go," she said quickly. "If people talk—" Ethan shook his head. "Let them talk. You're safe here." Those words meant more to Maria than he realized. That night, after Clara was asleep, Maria stood by the window, looking out at the moonlit land. The ranch was quiet, peaceful. She thought of the place she'd left behind, the harsh words, the loneliness, and felt a deep gratitude she couldn't express. In another room, Ethan sat by the fireplace, mending a small baby blanket. He glanced up and saw Maria's reflection in the window light. For a long time, he simply watched her, not wanting to disturb the peace she seemed to bring into his home. When she turned and met his eyes, neither of them spoke. But in that silence, something gentle passed between them, a silent understanding that life had brought them together for a reason neither could yet name. Outside, the wind blew softly across the plains. Inside, a ranch that had once echoed with emptiness was beginning to feel like home again. The sun rose early over the ranch, painting the sky with soft pink and gold colors. The air smelled of fresh hay, and the sound of roosters echoed through the wide fields. For the first time in a long while, the mornings at Ethan's ranch felt alive again. Maria woke before dawn, as she always did. She wrapped her shawl around her shoulders and stepped outside to fetch water from the well. The cool air brushed her face, and she smiled when she heard baby Clara giggling from inside the house. That sweet sound had become her favorite part of every day. She poured water into a bucket and watched the first rays of sunlight touch the barn. The horses moved slowly inside their stalls, their soft snorts greeting her. She had learned their names, Dusty, Willow, and Star. Ethan had been surprised by how quickly the animals seemed to trust her. Maybe they felt the same calm energy she carried, quiet but strong. When she entered the house, Ethan was already at the table, fixing one of Clara's wooden toys. His hands were steady, though his eyes still carried that thoughtful sadness that never fully left him. "Good morning," Maria said softly. He looked up and smiled, a warm, genuine smile. "Morning. Coffee's ready." She nodded, pouring a cup for him before taking one for herself. It had become their quiet morning habit, sharing a few minutes of peace before the day's work began. Over time, they had found comfort in these small routines. Maria tended the garden and the animals. Ethan handled the heavy ranch work and the fences. And whenever he rode out to check the far fields, she watched him from the porch, praying silently for his safe return. Clara, growing stronger each day, followed Maria everywhere. The little girl laughed when Maria sang to her in her native tongue, though she didn't understand the words. Sometimes she'd tug at Maria's shawl and try to repeat the songs in her baby voice, filling the air with innocent joy. Ethan often paused his work just to listen. There was something healing about the sound of laughter again. It made the pain of the past feel a little lighter. As weeks turned into months, Maria's presence became part of the ranch's rhythm. She baked bread that filled the house with warmth, repaired old curtains with neat stitches, and taught Clara how to weave flowers into tiny wreaths. The once empty home slowly turned into a place of comfort again. But healing did not happen overnight. There were still quiet moments when old memories returned to both of them, memories that hurt too much to speak aloud. One late afternoon after a long day of work, Ethan sat on the porch cleaning his old saddle. The light from the setting sun made everything glow in orange and gold. Maria came outside holding 2 cups of tea. She handed one to him and sat down on the steps. Neither spoke for a while. They just watched the sky change colors. Then Maria said softly, "This place is peaceful. The land, it listens." "I can feel it," Ethan nodded. "That's why I never left. Some days it's quiet enough to hear your own heart." She smiled faintly. "Do you still hear yours?" He looked at her for a long time before answering. "Sometimes. Most days it's just the echo." Maria understood what he meant. She looked out at the open fields. "I used to think my heart stopped the day my world turned empty. But maybe it was only sleeping." Their eyes met and neither looked away. There was no rush in that silence, no fear, just 2 souls slowly finding their way back to life. Later that night, after putting Clara to bed, Maria sat near the fireplace mending one of Ethan's shirts. The flickering light danced across her face. Ethan walked in quietly, holding a small wooden box. "I want to show you something," he said. He opened the box, revealing a small locket inside. It was old and slightly worn, but beautiful. Inside was a tiny picture of Annie, his late wife, holding baby Clara. Maria looked at it with respect, her voice low. "She was very beautiful." Ethan nodded. "She was. She had a heart that could calm storms. When she left, I didn't think I'd ever feel peace again." He paused, looking into the fire. "But somehow this house doesn't feel so empty anymore." Maria didn't speak. She only smiled softly, setting down her sewing. The warmth between them didn't need words. It was something quiet and pure, like sunlight after rain. As the days passed, the bond between them deepened. Ethan began to rely on Maria's presence more than he realized. When he returned from the fields each evening, the sight of her by the fire or in the garden felt like coming home. Maria, too, felt something changing inside her. For years, she had carried the weight of being unwanted, unloved, and forgotten. But here, in this simple ranch, she felt seen, not for what she could give, but for who she was. One day, while Maria was washing clothes by the stream, Clara toddled toward her and slipped on a wet rock. The little girl cried out. Maria rushed forward, scooping her up gently, whispering soothing words. Clara clung to her neck, sobbing softly. Ethan, who had been nearby, hurried over, concern in his eyes. But when he saw how quickly Maria calmed the child, his heart softened. He realized something. Clara already saw Maria as her own. That night, after putting Clara to bed, Ethan stood by the door while Maria tidied up the table. "You're good with her," he said quietly. Maria smiled shyly. "She's easy to love." Ethan's voice grew softer. "You are too." The words hung in the air between them, simple but powerful. Maria froze for a moment, unsure what to say. Then she lowered her eyes, her cheeks warming. "No one has said that to me before," she whispered. Ethan took a small step closer. Then they were blind, but he didn't reach for her. He only nodded gently, giving her the respect and space she deserved. It wasn't a moment of passion. It was one of deep understanding, of two hearts slowly mending together. The following morning, the ranch seemed brighter. The sky was clear, the air soft, and Clara's laughter filled the yard as she chased a butterfly. Maria stood nearby, her eyes sparkling with quiet happiness. Ethan watched her from the porch, his heart full of emotions he couldn't name. She had brought life back into his home, light back into his world, and love back into a heart he thought would never beat the same again. That evening, as they sat around the fire, Ethan played an old tune on his harmonica, a melody he hadn't touched since Annie's passing. Maria listened with closed eyes, letting the sound wash over her. When he finished, she whispered, "It's beautiful." He smiled. "I forgot how good it feels to play." "You remembered because your heart is waking again," she said softly. For a long time, they sat together in the warm glow of the fire. Outside, the crickets sang, and the stars shone bright across the wide New Mexico sky. Neither of them spoke again that night. But they both knew something had changed. The pain of the past was still there, but it no longer ruled their lives. Two wounded hearts were slowly healing side by side on a quiet ranch where kindness had replaced sorrow. The morning light crept softly into the ranch, painting the wooden floors in gentle gold. Birds sang from the fence posts, and the smell of fresh earth from the garden filled the air. Maria sat by the porch, her hands folded in her lap, staring out at the wide fields. Today felt different. There was a quiet heaviness in her chest, a feeling she could not yet name. For weeks, she had lived among the warmth of the ranch, the laughter of baby Clara, the quiet patience of Ethan, and the soft hum of routine that made each day feel safer than the last. She had begun to feel at home, but the world outside still called to her in whispers. She knew that she did not belong here by any right. The thought that she was only a guest weighed heavily on her. Ethan was busy in the barn repairing a broken gate. The sun glinted off the metal hinges as he worked, his strong hands steady, his face focused yet calm. Occasionally he glanced toward the house, seeing Maria sitting quietly. Each time he looked, his heart swelled with a feeling he had tried to ignore, a feeling that had grown from small sparks into something he could no longer deny. That afternoon, Maria helped Clara practice walking along the garden path. The little girl's laughter rang through the air like a small bell in the quiet countryside. Maria reached out her hands, steadying Clara as she took one careful step after another. Each stumble brought a new giggle, and each giggle brought a warmth to Maria's heart she had not felt in years. As she watched Clara, Maria realized something that both thrilled and frightened her. She loved this child, not just as a caretaker, but as someone who had become part of her heart. And if she could love Clara, could she allow herself to love the man who had given her this home and this chance to heal? That evening, Maria stood at the edge of the porch, the wind brushing her hair gently across her face. Ethan returned from the barn, brushing dust from his clothes. He noticed her standing there, silent and still, as if listening to something the world could not offer him. "Maria," he said softly, walking closer. She turned, her face uncertain, her hands fidgeting with the shawl around her shoulders. "You're quiet tonight. Something on your mind?" Maria took a deep breath. I cannot stay," she said, her voice trembling. "I am not meant to be here. I have no right, no claim to this home, this family." Ethan's heart sank. He had feared this moment, yet he tried to remain calm. "You've done more than claim anything," he said gently. "You've made this place feel alive again. You've made it a home for both Clara and me." Maria shook her head slowly. "You would be better without me. I am only a stranger who wandered into your life. You will grow tired of me, and I cannot bring harm to you or Clara by staying." Ethan reached for her hands, holding them in his. His touch was warm, steady, and full of unspoken words. "Maria," he said, his voice firm but gentle, "I have never asked for much in life, but I need you here. Clara needs you here. I cannot imagine our days without you." Maria looked into his eyes and saw a depth of feeling she had not expected. It was not pity. It was not obligation. It was something far stronger. Something that stirred her heart in ways she could not name. For the first time she felt seen, not as someone broken, not as someone unwanted, but as someone who mattered. Tears welled up in Maria's eyes, though she tried to blink them away. I do not know if I am worthy of this." "Have you?" she whispered. Ethan shook his head, smiling softly. "You are more than worthy. You are the reason our hearts have found peace again." You have given Clara love, and you've reminded me what it feels like to hope." Maria's chest tightened. She had spent years believing that her life would always be filled with sorrow and solitude. She had learned to survive alone, to hide her feelings, and to expect nothing from the world. And yet, here was a man who offered her everything without asking for anything in return, except for her presence. She thought of Clara, reaching for her hand each morning, laughing at the smallest things, learning to walk, to speak, to love. Could she walk away from this child who had already become part of her soul? Could she leave the man who had shown her patience, kindness, and a gentle strength that made her heart feel safe again? The wind stirred around them, carrying the scent of wildflowers and earth. Maria felt a quiet resolve forming inside her. She looked up at Ethan, her eyes shining with unshed tears. I will stay," she said softly. Ethan's face lit up with relief and joy. You mean it?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Maria nodded. "I mean it. I will stay. Not as a guest, not as someone in debt, but as part of this family, if you will have me." Ethan closed the distance between them, gently taking her face in his hands. "You've always been part of this family," he said. "You just didn't know it yet." Tears streamed down Maria's cheeks, but they were tears of joy, of relief, of hope renewed. She leaned into Ethan's touch, feeling a warmth that had been absent for too long. That night, after Clara had fallen asleep, Maria sat with Ethan by the fire. They didn't speak much, only letting the quiet settle around them. But in that silence there was a connection deeper than words, a bond that had been forged from shared pain, kindness, and trust. As the days turned into weeks, Maria settled fully into her new life. She and Ethan worked side by side on the ranch, tending to the fields, the animals, and their small home. Clara followed them everywhere, her laughter and curiosity filling the air with light. Maria began to feel whole again. Her heart, once heavy with loss and shame, now carried love for the child who had claimed a piece of her soul, and love for the man who had shown her patience and respect. Ethan, too, found his own heart healing in ways he hadn't expected. The loneliness that had weighed on him for so long began to lift, replaced by quiet happiness and a sense of purpose. He realized that love could arrive in the most unexpected ways, often when one least expected it. The ranch, once quiet and empty, was now filled with laughter, song, and the gentle rhythm of daily life. Maria had brought life back into the home, not just in small tasks or chores, but in the way she touched hearts with her presence. Even the land seemed to respond. The fields were greener, the animals more lively, and the sunsets more brilliant. The world outside still whispered of hardships and uncertainties, but within the walls of the ranch there was peace, warmth, and the quiet promise of new beginnings. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the horizon, Ethan and Maria stood together on the porch, watching the sky turn shades of pink and gold. Clara was asleep inside, and the only sound was the gentle rustle of the wind through the trees. Ethan took Maria's hand in his, holding it with quiet reverence. "I am glad you stayed," he said softly. Maria smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "So am I," she whispered. For the first time in many years, both of them felt complete. Not because life had given them everything, but because they had found each other. Together they would face whatever the world had in store, stronger for the love, trust, and quiet courage they had discovered on the ranch. And in that moment, as the sun set behind the hills, the future felt bright, full of promise and entirely theirs. The ranch was alive with quiet energy. Morning light spilled across the fields, catching the dust on the fences and making the dew on the grass sparkle like tiny diamonds. Maria moved through the yard with purpose, carrying a basket of eggs from the chicken coop. Baby Clara toddled behind her, laughing as she stumbled over her own feet and tried to imitate Maria's every move. Ethan watched from the porch, sipping coffee. His heart was full in a way it hadn't been for many years. Watching Maria care for Clara, patiently, tenderly, without complaint, he realized how deeply she had become part of their lives. She was no longer a guest. She was family. The warmth she brought into their home seemed to seep into every corner of the ranch, making the walls brighter, the air lighter, and even the animals livelier. Clara reached for Maria's hand, her tiny fingers curling around it. "Mama?" she asked, using the word for the first time. Maria's eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of joy. She knelt down and hugged the little girl close. "Yes, little one," she whispered. "I am your mama." Ethan's chest tightened as he watched this scene. He had always dreamed of a home filled with love, but he had never imagined it would come to him in this way. So quietly, so naturally, like a gift he hadn't even known he needed. The day continued in a gentle rhythm. Maria fed the animals, tended to the garden, and sang softly to Clara as she played with sticks and stones. Ethan worked the fields and repaired fences, but he often paused to glance back at the small family that had become his world. In the evenings, they gathered around the fireplace. Maria would tell stories of her childhood, carefully choosing words that Clara could understand. Ethan listened, sometimes smiling, sometimes quietly moved, as he watched Maria's voice bring the past to life for the little girl. Despite the happiness surrounding them, both Maria and Ethan knew the past could not be forgotten. There were still nights when memories of loss visited them, Maria thinking of the home and people she had been forced to leave behind, Ethan recalling his late wife and the life they had once shared. But now these memories no longer brought despair. Instead, they were reminders of how far they had come, of the strength and love that had grown from their hardships. One afternoon, a small wagon arrived at the ranch, bringing a neighbor who had heard news of a woman staying there. He looked curiously at Maria, unsure what to make of her presence. But Ethan simply introduced her warmly. "This is Maria. She's part of our family now." Maria smiled shyly, but her heart swelled with pride. For the first time, she was seen not as a stranger or someone in need of pity, but as a woman who belonged, who mattered. The neighbor left with a nod of respect, and Maria realized that she no longer feared the judgment of the outside world. She had found a place where she was valued and loved. As the weeks turned into months, life on the ranch settled into a gentle, happy routine. Clara grew stronger and more independent, always curious and eager to explore. Maria encouraged her, teaching her small lessons about the land, the animals, and the importance of kindness. Every time Clara laughed, Maria's heart lifted, and she felt a sense of belonging she had never known. Ethan and Maria also began to grow closer in ways they hadn't before. Their relationship was built on trust, respect, and quiet understanding. They didn't rush. They didn't force words that weren't ready to be spoken. Instead, they shared moments. The way Maria looked at Clara with love, the way Ethan watched Maria work in the fields, the silent connection they felt when their hands brushed while carrying water or tending to the garden. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the hills, painting the sky with soft pinks and purples, Ethan walked to the porch where Maria sat with Clara on her lap. The little girl was laughing at a butterfly that had landed on her tiny hand. Ethan took a deep breath and sat beside them, his arm resting gently around Maria's shoulders. "Thank you," he said softly, "for everything, for staying, for giving this home back to me, and giving Clara a mother." Maria leaned her head against his shoulder, her heart full. "I should be the one thanking you," she whispered. "You gave me a home, a chance to heal and love. I never thought I would feel safe again, and yet here I am." Ethan pressed a gentle kiss to the top of her head. "We found each other when we needed each other most," he said. "You didn't just heal Clara and me, you healed me too." Maria looked out at the horizon, watching the sun disappear behind the hills. "This land, it has given me peace," she said. "But you gave me hope." And in that moment, they understood something profound. Family is not always born from blood. Sometimes it is built from kindness, trust, and shared hearts. Sometimes it is formed from quiet acts of love that grow stronger each day. As the night fell, the three of them, Ethan, Maria, and Clara, sat together by the fire, wrapped in warmth and comfort. The house no longer felt empty. The walls no longer echoed with silence. Instead, they were filled with laughter, love, and the soft hum of life continuing. The ranch, too, seemed to rejoice in this newfound happiness. The animals were lively and gentle, the fields were green and thriving, and the sunset seemed brighter than ever before. It was as if the land itself had accepted Maria, embracing her as part of the family and home she had chosen to stay in. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into years. Clara grew taller and stronger, learning from both Ethan and Maria. She ran through the fields, helped tend the garden, and listened carefully to the stories Maria told of her childhood. She learned not only the lessons of the land, but the lessons of the heart, the value of kindness, patience, and love. Maria, too, grew in ways she had never imagined. The woman who had once been cast aside for what she could not give had now found a place where her presence mattered more than anything. She had a family who loved her, a child who needed her, and a man whose quiet strength gave her hope. She had found belonging in a world that had once rejected her. Ethan watched them often, silently grateful for the twist of fate that had brought Maria into their lives. She had transformed their home from a place of quiet sorrow into a haven of love and laughter. He could no longer imagine life without her. One crisp morning, as the first snowflakes of winter began to fall, Ethan took Maria's hand in his and led her to the porch, where Clara played in the soft, cold grass. "Maria," he said gently, "you've made this place a home and you've made my heart whole again. Will you be my wife?" Tears sprang to Maria's eyes, but they were tears of joy. She had dreamed of love, yes, but never believed it could come to her after all she had lost. Now, with Ethan's hand in hers and Clara laughing nearby, she knew that the answer was clear. "Yes," she whispered, her voice breaking softly. "Yes, I will." And so the three of them, Ethan, Maria, and Clara, continued their life on the ranch. Together they faced challenges and joys alike, knowing that their bond was stronger than any hardship. They built a home full of laughter, love, and kindness, a place where every heart mattered. Years later, when the ranch was filled with the sounds of a growing family, Maria often thought back to the day she had wandered into Ethan's life. She had been lost, lonely, and unsure of her worth. Now she was loved, cherished, and at peace. She had discovered that sometimes life's greatest gifts come when we least expect them, that even in moments of sorrow, hope can be found, and that family is not always defined by blood, but by love, trust, and the courage to open one's heart. As the sun set behind the hills, casting long shadows across the fields, Maria, Ethan, and Clara sat together on the porch. The wind whispered softly through the trees, carrying with it a promise of many bright days to come. And in that gentle silence, with hearts full and spirits at peace, they knew that they had found something truly extraordinary, a new kind of family born not of chance but of love, kindness, and second chances. Your full story is now complete, beautifully divided into 5 parts, each expanded to be cinematic, emotional, and engaging.